Our first speaker is going to be Shirley Williams McLean, former executive director of the North Carolina Hunger Network. And she's been a longtime community playwright and producer, focusing on historical situations like slavery and organizing many, many people in her community to be involved and learning at the same time. She's going to talk about getting in touch with childhood trauma and hopefully what she thinks are some ways of healing. I just want to once more welcome the guests. John, are you here?
Yeah.
Thank you for answering, because I don't see a list of people in the guests category. Shirley, thank you so much for being with us. I'm going to show your first slide.
Okay, well, thank everyone for being here this afternoon and being with us today. And I especially want to thank Starry Kruger Rural Development Leadership Network for making this platform possible for all these years, making it possible for rural women in the United States and to ensure that our voices are heard internationally. Thank you, Starry. Last year, as I was writing a document for Rural Development Leadership Network for its 40th anniversary, I noticed that I was having a difficult time writing the document. I was overwhelmed with sadness and feelings of inadequacy. After long thinking, I soon figured out that what I was writing about was making me feel that way. So today, I would like to share with you a little bit about my life as a sharecropper's daughter and the trauma that took place and the healing that didn't take place. This is my story. I was born in 1945 in a rural town of Holly Springs, North Carolina. I was the fourth of 8 children. My parents had a 3rd and 4th grade education, and they were sharecroppers. To me, sharecropping was an epic journey of betrayal, deception, poverty, untreated trauma, uncontrollable rage, instability, education deprivation, and healthy looking bodies hiding chronic disease. But this was only rivaled by the sheer strength of my family's collective will to survive. Traumatic events can include experiences such as natural disasters, acts of violence such as assault, abuse, mass shooting, car wrecks, crashes, and other accidents. Yes, my traumatic experiences occurred throughout my childhood and young adult life. Until now, I I didn't realize that I had never dealt with many of the things that had happened to me as a child. My first working experience was traumatic for me. I was working at a tobacco barn putting in tobacco. I was only 9 years old when the landlord demanded that I be present to hand tobacco that day. My job was to bundle 3 or 4 large leaves together, hand it to a looper, grab the bundle, wrapped it around a string to attach it to a stick. I was terrified of the many translucent worms that grew on those tobacco leaves. The tobacco produced a sticky black substance on our hands, and it was called numb. And the reason that it was so bad for me is that it caused more trauma because I was a chronic thumb sucker. So I had to struggle through that initiation and also deal with the painful withdrawal of something that had comforted me so many times. My parents moved from landlord to landlord, most of the time because of financial disagreement. My father was always angry at the end of the harvest season. There never was anything left uh, for us to continue on that year. My father always found other farms and shacks for us to live and work. Many times my father would leave home, come back in the middle of the night with a new landlord. And he would have a truck, and we would break down all of the furniture and put it in the back of that truck and leave that particular landlord. The next day we would be attending a new school. We never said goodbye to our friends and teachers. I think we moved over 13 times, sometimes going to the same school twice. With all of that, my mother managed to get 6 of us into college and 2 into technical school. But my father was filled with rage. The more we sharecropped, the more he became violent. He took his rage out at home, not on the landlords, but he didn't beat us. He was violent toward things such as breaking glass and furniture and destroying many holiday meals because of his violence. His violence was a continuing, recurring trauma to us. And to this day, most of my siblings have never been treated for that trauma. And I am revealing this today, not to tell you this, just for you to know, but many, many women like me who live in rural areas have gone through some of the same trauma. I don't care how many years ago it was, you could still be going through it right now. And I'm almost 80 years old. And here it is, slipping back into my life and causing me to feel bad. So that's why I'm doing this, so other women can feel free to get help for the trauma that need, whatever it may have been. And I mean, this is not the only kind of trauma people have, and as many of you know, but everyone has a local mental health facility that you can go to, you can call and get some help from that mental health place, from a pastor, from a counselor, from a friend. But do get help. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Shirley. I think maybe we'll go through the speakers before we have questions.
Okay.
But I have a question for the group. Someone asked me to do full screen, and I don't see the control to do that. Meredith, are you still here? She's not here. Okay.
I'm here. It is on full screen, I believe.
No.
Oh, here it comes.
And also people can turn on their video to ask Shirley questions if they want to.
She said she was waiting to the end, Starry.
I think we will because we have
Okay.
a lot of people, a lot of
All
guests.
right. That's fine with me.
And here it's Shirley's contact information.
feel free to give me a call. That's me in my garden.
Our next speaker is Meredith Coleman McGee. She's an entrepreneur, an author, an editor, and a publisher. She owns her own publishing company called Meredith Inc. She's written 13 books, 2 of which I believe are biographies, and 2 of which are memoirs. And she's going to talk about what she's gained from that experience and appreciating how ordinary people can have extraordinary qualities and vice versa. Thank you very much, Meredith.
Thank you.
Now I'm going to switch. I'm going to
You-
stop screen sharing and go to Meredith's slides.
I'm pulling them up.
Okay. Oh,
Can
sorry.
wait a minute. Hold on 1 second. Oh, can you give me the right to share the screen so I can get my slides?
Where do I do that? Can you do it from your end?
It said that you disabled participants screen share.
I don't see a screen sharing option.
Okay, well, can you share it then?
Okay, I'm sorry.
Okay, so I am a book publisher here in Jackson, Mississippi, but this presentation is about the 13 4 of the 13 books that I have written. 2 of them are biographies and 2 are memoirs. My 13th book is a memoir of Billie Holiday, who was a famous jazz singer, and that is a biography. I also wrote a biography on James Meredith, my uncle, who played a pivotal role in the civil rights movement by becoming the first Black to go to a college, all white college in the state of Mississippi, Ole Miss. And the other 2 books are memoirs. One is Every Inch Love Will, which is a memoir of my late husband. And that's him standing there beside me receiving a community award from Firefighters Unlimited. And the last one is Married to Sin, my first book written in 2012. And it's a story about Darlene Collier. And Darlene Collier and my uncle both grew up in rural Mississippi on farms. She grew up on a farm that her great grandfather purchased after slavery, and my uncle grew up on a farm that his father purchased in 1923. And my uncle, like Billie Holiday, became famous. And my husband was not famous, but I wrote a book by him, which one of the young men who read it said that reading his book actually helped save his marriage. So these are stories that inspire people, and the inspiration inspires people to act. And sometimes people act because of their dreams. And it's so beautiful that dreams do come true. And I'm sure that Billie Holiday would never have imagined after she dropped out of school when she was in the 5th grade, that she would become one of um, um, the defining voice in jazz and be one of the major jazz vocalists of the Harlem Renaissance. But was somebody saying something? And of course, and my uncle grew up doing Jim Crow at a time when blacks could not go to an all-white college. They couldn't even uh, pursue degrees and to be a lawyer, a doctor, a pharmacist, nurse. So he broke the barriers with the help of the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. They were in court 18 months before they wanted the right for him to go to a school to pursue a field that he wanted to field political science. And at that time, we only had 3 black lawyers in the state of Mississippi. They had to go outside the state to even study law. So he, the impact that he had just from that is being the first black at an all-black college helped people who look like him be able to pursue degrees that help them get high-paying jobs or things that they were interested in. Because everybody wanted to be a doctor, a teacher or a preacher, and some of the other limited fields. I was trying to see how much time I had left. I think a couple of minutes. And Billie Holiday also was the first black woman whose face was featured on the cover of Time magazine in 1939. She was one of the 100 women of the year, and she was listed for her singular voice, which she was the defining voice in jazz. She was inspired to sing by Bessie Smith, who was the highest paid blues artist, male or female, in the country at that time. And she was also inspired by Louis Armstrong, who was as big as Jazz Gat, and he was from New Orleans, Storyville, as a matter of fact. And my husband was a plumber, ordinary man who was married to an author and a writer, and his story is inspiring. And he has wonderful reviews on Amazon and Barnes and Noble for his story. And I think that that's probably my time, but I wanted to share how these stories inspire, and inspiration helps people to carry out their goals and dreams do come true. Thank you, Meredith Coleman McGee.
Thank you, Meredith. Here's Meredith's contact information. We're gonna see. Oh. Our next speaker is Margarita Roma, who's in Florida. She's executive director of Farmer Self-Help. I think I should mute people. Oh,
No. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for allowing me to present the work and development of our farm worker women in Dade City, Florida, and how we developed and became an organization. Back in 1971, when I was living in North Tampa, a woman came to my door, knocked on my door, and said that she was from an African-American church, and she wanted to ask me to translate for her in a migrant camp. And I was just astounded because I had been away from a farm worker life, having been raised as a farm worker and having worked in the fields, but I was far removed from that by 1971. So it was sort of strange that she would know to come to my door and ask me to do that. So I call it a God thing. And so I went to the migrant camp, and I was just astounded by the fact that everything was still pretty much the way it had been when I was a kid. And I'm going, what? Nothing has changed. People are still, except that they were undocumented from Mexico, where before we were American citizens working in the fields. So that was a big difference. And so I worked as a translator for the different evangelists that she would bring to this migrant camp every Wednesday for 7 years. And then all of a sudden, I am going through a divorce, and I still have 3 children to support. And my friend says, okay, you've got to get educated. You've got to do something for yourself. And so she put me in a junior college in Dade City. And when I went to Dade City, our people from the migrant camp just continued to follow me. And it was very strange because generally Mexican men do not allow women to take any kind of leadership. But all of a sudden, it seemed like they were allowing me and calling me to be a leader because I was an American citizen and everybody else was undocumented. And I want you to know the undocumented people of 1971 versus the people of today is very different. And if you went to the fields, the only people you saw in the fields were Mexican people. And so we continued to gather, and then I was in the college, I was learning, people were teaching me. I had some very good friends that were helping me because I was really lost. When I was 42 years old, I was really like a really old lady. Now I am a really old lady, but I feel like a young lady now. And so as we struggled through, we figured out, what are we going to do? Well, we have to learn to speak English, because if we don't speak English, we're going to have a problem. We didn't have any food, so we had to look for food. And then we decided we needed a name. So we came up with Farm Worker Self-Help. And because we wanted to let people know that we wanted to help ourselves. We didn't just want to ask for help. So out of all of that, we worked together. One of our ladies was the first one to get her GED, and she began to work with us because she was an American citizen. So I found one to help me. And together with all the undocumented people of our community in Farm Worker Self-Help and around where we live today, we organized, and we did the very first documentary about immigration in Dade City, Florida. And so it was a week thing that lasted a whole week of how we were trying to organize. And of course, you couldn't show people's faces because of what was going on with immigration at the time. Then the Simpson-Mazzoli bill came along, and the Border Patrol was really, really bad. They were arresting our people, pulling them out of the fields, taking the kids out of school. And that's when I really woke up. And we got really angry and said, no, we got to do something about this. And so we started organizing, started teaching our people about their rights and that they could lock their doors and they didn't have to open them. And I would run through the fields and tell people to hide, because here comes the Border Patrol. And that's when I stopped wearing stockings, because I tear them up. And because I'd be running through the fields, and we started having our own way of letting people know when the Border Patrol was coming. So it was a really hard time, and people don't really understand how many people suffered from that. And so out of that, all of that, we were finally, the Simpson-Mazzoli bill passed, and it wasn't exactly what we wanted, but we went to Washington, we went to Tallahassee. We started looking at how could we ask the questions, and my people could ask the questions about the pesticides and things that were wrong. And we were able to pass a lot of bills. We did some good work thanks to Karen Woodall, because she was only 24 when I met her, and she's been my mentor ever since. And so out of all of that, we ended up with three things that we really wanted to center on, and that was education, advocacy, and organizing. And so education meant not only just English, but learning about healthcare, teaching about healthcare, what was going to keep us alive, what was killing us, what did we have to know about the different things, what was going on in Tallahassee, how could we teach our young people, and then advocacy, how did we teach our people to be their own voice? So we took families to Tallahassee, and we slept on the floor, and when we went to Washington, there'd be 6 of us in one hotel room, and everybody shared what they had. And then organizing our people. We would organize in the fields, sometimes in the woods, so that they wouldn't know we were out there. But we began to change things, and we brought a lot of changes to the area that we live in today. And now today you see some of those pictures of our girls, that some of them are now professionals doing good work. But I have to thank all of the women, immigrant women that I first met, that some of them are gone now, because in the fields you work so hard that it ends up messing up your knees, your hands, everything. You know, you end up with arthritis in your knees, you end up with all kinds of illnesses. And some of our women are dead and gone, and they're not even as old as I am. And so out of all of that, we've developed all sorts of things. I heard about trauma today. The trauma, we've had it too. We know about mental health now. And so we've done all kinds of projects and programs. And we have a chapter called Crime Survivors, where we talk about how to heal, how to come past some of those things. So over the years, we've come across many things that we've had to fix. And as we came across an issue, then we try to fix it. When the Lions Club in Zephyr Hills, which is 9 miles away, would not give our undocumented people glasses because they didn't have a social security card, we developed our own Lions Club. And so you know, we ended up doing all sorts of things. And not only that, even as an organization that has a big heart, but really we're not very rich, we never have enough money. God takes care of us, because we do not take any money from the government, because then we don't have to show anybody on our who are we serving. And we still continue to serve a lot of undocumented people, because they're going to keep coming. They are looking for that, you know, great American way. And so we have to do all we can. We don't invite people to come from other countries, because it's a very hard life. It's not easy. And probably I'm past my time. Thank you, and God bless you. And remember this, this has been a God call and a God work. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Margarita. Here's Margarita's contact information. And speaking of inspiring stories, that's another one. I have to switch. I have to stop sharing and start again. Our next speaker, it's Trina Cunningham. Trina is a Maidu tribal water and fire practitioner. She lives in California, and she's going to talk about the Maidu people, their location, a bit of their culture and history, and her activities. Thank you very much, Trina, for being with us.
Thank you, Starry.
I don't see your picture. Oh, there you are. Okay.
I'm here. Greetings, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining today. I appreciate this opportunity to share pieces of my life experience as related to the past, present, and future of Indigenous equity and cultural survival in our ancestral homelands. Our homelands are in rural northeastern California in the United States. We lived in these places with relative peace and abundance prior to mass immigration, colonialization, and the gold rush of 1849. There are thousands of indigenous nations across the United States, Mexico, and Canada who experienced rapid loss of life due to diseases, genocide, kidnapped children and families into various sorts of slavery, boarding schools, as well as restrictions to and punishments for engaging in our religious and spiritual practices. The impacts of systematic removal from our land-based culture, paired with policies and legislation to create deep divides and marginalization, continues to support and grow disparities, not only in indigenous nations, but to communities across the United States. Adverse policies often begin with targeting ethnicities or communities. When practiced over a length of time, those devised inequities also become integrated and ingrained into a way of life, institutionalized, and disintegrate the understanding of personal and community well-being. The impacts of separation have had devastating impacts at personal, community, and spiritual levels. Beginning to identify patterns of violence and aggression in my personal life has been part of my journey. I haven't always seen or understood the violence or the inequities as they were presented. And it's been essential for my survival as a human being and for my communities to try to integrate into systems that were continually violating us. These patterns of inequities have been represented through other people and what they bring to the table in a Rural Development Leadership Network Institute that I participated in. Back in 2008 or 2009, one of the speakers was Jack Gilboa, and he was from the Black Belt of Alabama. And the thing that I really remember about him and what he stressed at that time was, we are what we bring to the table. So each of us really needs to look inside of ourselves, because regardless of how we interact with our families, our jobs, and decision-making that affects other people, who we are is affecting those things. And if we are replicating systems of violence and inequity, that's what we are bringing to the table, and those are the decisions that will lead us. And so that has inspired me since that time to really contemplate and try to understand how that affects us today. Other forms of violence that I want to briefly speak to that are happening in Indigenous nations are the missing and murdered Indigenous women, and that's large scale and a lot of unsolved murders, as well as California being a hub of human trafficking. And so those are two of the reasons of why it matters today, and how that systemic violence evolves into things that we don't recognize. And as we try to pinpoint solutions, we have to look really deep at the past at times. Another reason of why it matters today that I wanted to talk about as related to land is wildfire. And in California and in my ancestral homeland of Plumas County and the Upper Feather River, we've experienced numerous high-intensity catastrophic wildfires. In 2020, we experienced what was called the North Complex Fire, and that burned a little over 330,000 acres of lands. 16 people died in that wildfire, and the last ceremonial house of the Maidu Nations was burned down. It was outside of the Mountain Maidu homelands. It was our southern cousins. That ceremonial house may never be rebuilt in our lifetimes. Starry has a picture up right now of the last ceremonial house that my family ran, and it was in a place called Coppertown in Yotomatokoyo, known as Genesee Valley. I still live in that valley, but the roundhouse itself was abandoned due to land policies, and we were removed from our landscape and forced to live elsewhere. And so that abandonment of culture and spiritual practice has further divided and created a loss of lifeways and systems. In 2021, we experienced the Dixie Fire, and the previous slide that Starry showed was a landscape that it's been a thank you, Starry, a spiritual landscape for me. It's a prayer place that is powerful to me. And as you can see, before the fire picture and the after the fire picture of severely burned slopes. And people may think, well, that's out in the wilderness. It really doesn't matter. But it does matter to us and to our community, but it also matters to 27 million Californians who are using water for drinking water, agricultural purposes, and everything that we use water for downstream from us. And so when that water is contaminated at source, it becomes a large issue. And also, I do want to say that that's an example of what the effects of the removal of indigenous nations from their own homelands, because we tended and highly manipulated these landscapes for food, for medicines, and for life. For everything that we need now, we depended on these landscapes. We did not have the amount of world trade that we have now. So if we didn't tend these landscapes, we would starve to death, die, not have our medicines or access to our spiritual places. The amount of erosion, destruction to transportation routes, travel, and communications has been affected also. So go ahead to the next slide, Starry. So also the built and the unbuilt communities that have been affected, we have the opportunity now to rebuild some. There were 3 towns that were completely burned down or almost completely burned down in the Dixie Fire, in the closest towns that service me and my communities. That includes healthcare, pharmacy, post offices, and you know, just services, public safety. And so we have the opportunity now to not be erased in building those communities this time. We have the opportunity to work with architects to create a type of a cultural immersion and to be seen and present, so that when you come to our community, you will know that you're in the Maidu homelands. And so that can also help the economies recover, because how many of you love to go to other countries and you pay a lot of money to go to those countries to experience their language, culture, and foods? And if we can rebuild that system in our own communities, I feel that we will begin a pathway to equity that doesn't exist at this time. And as we move forward, there are silver linings. And so this picture is a place, a sacred site that I was able to take the incident management team while the fire was still active, but had already burned through this area. And because my son, my oldest son, is a wildland firefighter, he was actually assigned at times to work with me as a tribal knowledge holder to both protect and look at how we can look at recovery in these places. So this was a picture of my son and I, and even though we've just gone through a catastrophic life-altering event, I was just so happy to work with him professionally for the first time in our lives. And so even through trauma, there are silver linings. And as Margarita and other speakers today pointed out, we have to hold those, because sometimes those are the only things that keep us moving forward through everything else. And so so I really wanted to highlight some of the opportunities of what I was calling silver linings towards equity. And in recent years in California, especially, the land back movement has been gaining momentum, and creating that opportunity for tribes and tribal peoples to have land ownership, to be the decision makers, and to implement our traditional ecological knowledge into these landscapes is vital. I did also want to point out that there are also inequities in the land back movement. There's federally recognized tribes, there's non-federally recognized tribes, there's intertribal organizations and nonprofits, and then there's individuals that really aren't represented in any of these ways. And so when we look at land back or land making decisions, I really urge agencies and decision makers and just community grassroots people like us to acknowledge and reach out to all of those communities. It's really essential towards equity. Otherwise, you're further marginalizing the communities that are most at risk. And there are huge opportunities to collaborate with Indigenous and non-Indigenous communities to rebuild fire impacted communities. As I spoke to before, but there's also, I've been presented with the opportunity and funding to develop tribal stewardship plans. And so the funding was just awarded on February 29th. And so we're in the process of figuring out how we're going to develop a tribal stewardship plan that can be used as a template across multiple landscapes. And so there are different opportunities that many of us we're just scrappy and we're not going to give up. We're going to find a way no matter what, because we have to. Our lives really do depend on it. And so we're looking at agreements with the Feather River Land Trust, which is a land trust that's local to our region. Other nonprofits, both tribal and non-tribal, resource conservation districts, state agencies, and federal properties such as the Bureau of Land Management and the United States Forest Service. This is a lot of work. We don't always feel like we have a container to move through because of those inequities of federally, non-federally recognized and having a status or a title that's legally recognizable and represented, but we are finding ways through that. So I want to thank everybody for their time and look forward to further work.
Thank you so much, Trina. Amazing what you covered. And here is Trina's email address if you want to be in touch with her. But we have now finished the 4 speakers. I am going to invite comments and questions, but just also to mention that each one of them, starting with Shirley, who talked about trauma, and oh, here comes Sherry Green. She's an RDLN leader, so I'm glad she's joining us. Shirley talked about childhood trauma, and it came from inequity, and each person addressed that same issue in different ways. Meredith talking about her uncle who integrated the University of Mississippi. Margaret talking about farm workers, which she was one herself, learning to put themselves forward, make demands, and get action. And Trina, pardon me? Trina, with
That was just a little noise from my side, sorry.
What'd you say? I didn't hear you.
I was saying that was a little noise coming from my side. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Apologies for the technical challenges, but I would like to invite people to make comments or questions, and we have quite a few in the chat. Amazing women. Indeed. Thank you for your work. This is very good. So well done. Thank you. These are amazing women and presentations. Thank you for putting this on. So thank you all for being here. And I am not sure how to know that you want to say something. So perhaps, I know there's a raised hand, but I don't see it. So if you want to start speaking, you're invited to do so. And then the other people maybe could stop speaking when they hear somebody.
Cheryl, I wanted to ask you, oh,
Yes,
did you ever get any counseling for the trauma that you experienced when you was a sharecropper?
no, no, not that. No, I did not. And it never occurred to us when we were growing up that that was possible. We barely knew what mental illness was. We had no idea of what to do with our father. And so we were out in the rural areas where there weren't, there wasn't much, a house uh, down in a field without contact with many other people except school. No, we didn't. And we are now, up in our ages, and we are realizing what happened to us. We are now feeling it and seeing the results of untreated trauma. And so we now kind of getting together and talking about things with each other. And because we didn't know when we were coming up, we knew that was awful, but we didn't know what to do. No, my mother.
Were there other men in the
No,
living on the farm?
two
That was the
brothers.
only family on the farm.
And no, no, my two brothers were the smallest in the family. They were the youngest, and so they were little toddlers, and
So there were
like
no other families on the farm besides your family.
that's right. Sometimes that's all a landlord had was one family, and we had 6 girls who worked like boys, and so
Oh,
we didn't have many people around. It was actually in the country. I mean, we were off to ourselves in a little shack, and that's how we grew up.
okay. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Somebody raised her hand and I guess I didn't catch it.
I think it's Lucy Isaiah.
Yeah, could you speak, please?
Okay. Hello.
Hi.
Hello.
Yeah. I just want to ask because my mom grew up in a rural area, and although I've moved to the city, but I'm just looking because when all the women were giving their presentation, I'm just looking at just the transfer of post trauma to the children because my mom didn't go to school, and she although she was creative in what she does, but the trauma of the suffering that she went through, even through forced marriages and all this little traditional thing that happened to her, that she couldn't have support on how to express it out or how to get support. I can see that affect in how she bring up her child, and even we that we've grown up, we even grow up in the city, but there's this long time trauma that transfer from mother to children and also escalate in the development of women. In your cases, how do you think um, the government should create a policy that will support people, that a platform or a center where people can go and help? Because like some of the conversation that I've had so far, it's like it is the people that have suffered that is not creating the awareness, but still there's no like a long time support from the government in terms of how they can that they can actually take this pain from people.
Well, are you asking me? Because I do have an answer. I think that we are the ones
I
who,
am asking, yeah.
okay, I think that we are the ones who will have to lead that fight to get more resources for mental health for older women, rural women, and all women, as a matter of fact. But the rural women are the ones who have been absent of these resources. So we really need to band together and advocate somehow advocate for these resources to exist. And anyone else want to add in? Because we need the urban women also are going
Right.
with are going without treatment for their trauma.
Well, I wanted to ask Miss Lucy, Isaiah, what country are you from?
I'm from Nigeria, but at the moment I base in UK. And
Oh, I
I
see,
would
I see.
say because I was sent to UK as a maid. This get a little bit emotional for me.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes.
take your time, take your time.
So
But I think questions
I just think
to sorry.
I just think is you know the challenges my mom faced. She couldn't get anyone to kind of help her. That was one of the reasons why she couldn't look after because she had mental health. She
Mm-hmm.
couldn't get anyone to support her, so she
Mm-hmm.
ended up. Most of us were actually sent out as a maid. So I know there's a lot of rural women that their children have been taken away from them,
That's right.
and there's no much awareness and support, and even sometimes you don't even they don't even know what happened to their children.
That's right.
So the need for the support and awareness to empower women from that area so that they can fully be there for their kids.
That's right. The women do not know what happened to them, to themselves. They do not know what actually happened to them to cause them to be unable to take care of their children. So we have to start at the local level. We have to start in our churches. We have to anywhere that we can lend our voices so that people will come out of the woodworks and stop hiding their inner feelings and the impact of what trauma, whatever trauma it was, has had on them that keeps them from being a fully functioning individual.
And I wanted to see
We stay
Margarita and Trina, can you add to that conversation on ways that in your group people were able to deal with trauma?
I can speak to it that, as I said, I'm just learning to recognize it myself, and I feel like it was a derived system to create chaos in our lives and to create those inequities, Lucy, that you've experienced firsthand, and most of us, probably other participants on this call, have in different ways, regardless of gender or race, or seeing them. But for us, one of the things is education, counseling, of course. And before, counseling was stigmatized, or we didn't know it was even available. And so we still have people that are afraid to go to counseling or don't want to because I'm not sick. And it's
Right.
not about them being sick. Maybe they are sick. It's about recognizing patterns and finding pathways to empowerment. And so for us, and as we reside in our own homelands, we're looking at workforce development and how do we reteach our indigenous knowledge to our own people and create an economy, so they can actually have a job and pay their bills instead of having to resort to criminal activities, suicide, or other not good attributes in the community. So for me, also, like, working and advocating at that policy level to identify, hey, these are issues in our communities, and at that local, state, and federal decision-making level, we need that leadership to understand these things in depth, because only then will they be able to help make the decisions at that level, while others of us are just really working at the community family level.
I wanted to share that in our community, when back in the 70s and continues. We had to educate our community, our farm worker women, because they had always been told what to do. And, you know, they could have babies. They didn't have a choice whether they wanted to or didn't want to. They had to do whatever the husband said. They had no mind of their own. And that was me. And so one day I got, you know, thank God for a lot of good people that helped me so that I could grow. I didn't know that I could do what I did. I didn't know that I could do anything because I was always told that I was worthless, that I was nothing and nobody. And so I grew up thinking I was ugly. All my life, I thought I was ugly, and I didn't find out I was pretty until I saw a picture of myself one day and said, "Oh, wow, look at that." Well, now it's too late. But again, the thing is, I think culturally it goes across all of us. You know,
Yes.
all of us have sat here and said pretty much the same things. We have been traumatized. We do have to continue to educate our folks. And a lot of our elderly folks, a lot of our people that are in their 60s and 70s are still carrying some of that old stuff.
Absolutely.
I have a lady that works with us. She has been with me for 20 years. And every time we sit and talk, she cries because she's talking about all the things that her husband did to her. And she hasn't really forgiven him. She carries that. And we talk and we talk, and I try to share with her what I know. And we do care a lot about mental health. We do care, and we do know what we have to do to get better. But I think it goes across the board, and until all of us get together
Yes.
and drop the fences and drop
Yes.
the stuff, because we're really all the same.
Yes.
And then I think we may be able to get somewhere.
You all make some great points, and the point that Trina made about equity creates trauma, and Margarita feeling inferior, which is what Jim Crow does, which is what
Yes.
racism does against people of color. It makes them feel inadequate. And in the stories that I talked about, the two biographies and the two memoirs, there was trauma and pain. But my husband had to live with chronic pain, and he was had to deal with um, prescription drugs or not be able to get that kind of management at
Mm,
times. That, but
mm,
all of that is a whole nother issue. And then Billie Holiday faced discrimination, and then there was drugs, and then my uncle he was living at a time when you had to go through the back door. Were inferior or didn't have full citizenship rights, and we're still struggling to get citizenship rights. And when I lost my husband, I had to deal with grief. And the government, my father was a veteran. They sent me a grief counselor. Those are and support groups. Those are all things that can help people who are going through trauma, whatever the trauma is, whether it's gun violence, because we need resources and we need support.
Well, thank you for exchanging comments among yourselves to the speakers and for the women from Africa who joined. Would anyone else like to say something? We have a few other people from our network here. Lydia Villanueva, Michelle Barnes, Sherry Green. I'm not sure about Damada, but I invite, and John Zippert, of course. John Zippert is a board member, founding board member of the Rural Development Leadership Network. So if any of you would like to comment or ask a question, you're invited.
I would just thank all the presenters and you know, I think this presentation need to be shared more widely for I think the general public to understand, you know, really what has been done to people in this country in terms of marginalizing Black and brown and indigenous people. That, you know, it was deeply painful to even hear this today. And just, you know, I think people don't understand what the society and the culture and the economy has really done to people beyond the economic aspects, that it affected their mental, spiritual, physical being in various ways, and that a lot of people don't fully understand. The other comment, you know, really that if we had a real equitable and democratic society, some of the aspects of the trauma that you talked about here, there are government policies that would do some good.
Mhm.
For instance, during the pandemic, they gave a $400 a month child credit for a period of time. And that single action reduced the child poverty in America in half. So it's not, for an expense that is probably less than a battleship nationwide, you did away with half of the poverty, the child poverty in this country. So on a macro level, the policies of this country really need to be changed and directed toward the vast majority of people. And hopefully more of that will happen going forward. But we will have to vote, we will have to participate, we will have to organize, and we will have to continue to support groups like the Rural Development Leadership Network. I'll stop there, Starry.
Thank you very much, John, for those wise and informative comments.
Yeah, Star, this is Lydia. And again, thank you everybody for your amazing and tremendous work and dedication. It's very much needed, especially in this time of age where all we hear is a lot of the things that women in general are going through and how this country to a degree wants to take us back to some of that just by observing and listening to some of the politicians and the many things that are out there. I really appreciate the fact that this was put together because it's very inspiring, and thank you for your dedication. It is, I agree with John, it's something that we do need to continue to bring it to the front and continue to have these conversations, and showcase the tremendous amount of work that and contribution that women, I'm speaking on behalf of women, I don't want to leave men out, but certainly women have contributed to the society, to the well-being, to almost everything that we pretty much can have been engaged in, be a part of. So thank you, Starry and others that have put this together. I do agree that I think this needs to be shared and shared widely, because you guys are the ones that you're all the foot soldiers on the ground. You're doing the work, and this needs to be continued to be lifted up and talked about and showcased again, because we don't talk enough of this. So thank you, and thank you for allowing me to step in. You know, I observe you from a distance, but this one really caught my eye. So thank you very much.
Thanks for being with us, Lydia.
Thank you, everyone. And I plan to recirculate this. I'm gonna put it on YouTube and then get a link and share it with everyone, with Star, and then with the Rural Development Leadership Network online as well.
Hey,
What-
Meredith, since you said that, I am not computer literate, and I think it's on purpose, because at 87, my head is already full. But I would love for you to, if whoever could send me, somehow that you could contain that and send it to me so that I can share it with other folks. I
Sure,
would appreciate it. I would appreciate that.
absolutely.
We still have new people joining us. They missed a lot. Would any of the other guests like to say something? Michelle, Greg, Bambi, Daniel, Danny, Linda, Lucy, Luke, Sherry, Yvonne.
Well, I want to thank
Hello.
everybody. Oh,
Hello.
go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me? This is Michelle. Let me see if I could turn my camera on.
Hi, Michelle. Great.
I was I was multitasking. So glad to hear some of the comments. Just want you to know, I don't know, I tried to turn my camera on. I don't know if you can see me or not.
I see
We
Sherry.
can see you. We can see you.
Okay, okay. I'm at work, but I really enjoyed the conversation that I got a chance to hear. This is a definite worthwhile conversation, and so glad to see our ladies at RDLN and friends to come together for the CSW, a forum I've always glad to participate in, these rich international conversations. Becoming a part of this network has been a blessing and has enriched me in so many different ways. Also being able to attend CSW and hear all these different conversations that we typically don't have, even this surrounding trauma and dealing with trauma. I haven't talked to, I don't think, any of you in the last few weeks. I myself have been dealing with the death of my father, which was almost a year ago on the 23rd of this month. But last month, I was dealing with the loss of my father-in-law. And then 11 days later, my stepson passed. So that had been a lot. And we just buried them just a little bit ago. So everybody has some type of trauma. And I think a lot of us, especially people of color, maybe don't have access to, or maybe not open to receiving help that may be available, whether it's through grief or through trauma or what have you, to help us to move forward. And that it's not a bad thing. If you need to seek professional help, it's not a bad thing. And somehow also the mental health aspect of making sure that we check on one another and how we're coping with all the changes, especially since COVID. So again, I'm grateful to all the speakers and to Starry, love you, and all of the ladies, and best wishes to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you.
Michelle. Thank you so much. What about somebody from another country?
Well, we had the lady from Nigeria who lives in the United Kingdom to speak.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Hello?
Hello. Are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I've spoken here.
Okay.
May I ask a question of you? Would you like to leave your name and telephone number with Starry, so that if our group has a conference call on this topic, that we would like to include you?
Okay, should I leave it on the chat?
Starry?
Yeah.
Sorry, you want to leave it in the chat?
That would be good if we know how to capture the chat afterwards.
Yeah, leave it in the chat and I'll get it out. You can leave it in there now.
Okay, all right then.
Okay.
And we have another lady who's the CEO.
Where is she?
Just a second, I just lost.
Yeah, that's who just spoke, Sarah.
Pardon me?
Lucy Isaiah, CEO, she just spoke. She's leaving us information in the chat, I believe.
That's Lucy.
Oh, I
Okay.
got your information now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay.
Because in UK, yeah, I work with a lot of women, African women who has gone through certain trauma, and because a lot of them, their parents live in the rural area, and some of them migrated here because you just migrate from the rural area to this big city, and the changes and all the trauma they went through, and that of their parents, it still affect them, and they find it very difficult to strive even in the UK, you know. So these are some of the challenges I went through. The same. It took me over 15 years to kind of get my feet around. And I've seen a lot of women coming from Africa, from Nigeria, coming to the UK, also facing the same trauma. And there's no single support out there to identify, to see how these women, and this continue and also affect even them becoming a parent and in supporting their children. But where is the policy? How do we channel this? What is there in the policy that can help us to raise this awareness, talk to the government to say this is what is happening?
Well, John and Shirley have given us some ideas. But it must be hard to do it from another country. Are you involved in any movement activities now?
Somebody just asked, want to add my thank you to presenters and thank Trina for inviting us to the program, Linda Bailey.
Trina, thank you for inviting me, she says.
Definitely.
Trina, some of your friends are on here, I believe.
Yes. I think at that larger global level, like having this conversation right now and multiplying it times 100 across different communities. And then for me, as I said in my presentation, I didn't understand the violence that was being perpetrated through policy and just everyday life. And I was actually perpetuating it because I accepted it. And it's up to us. There's a lot of us that are in these positions around the world. And so when we find forums like that we can be inclusive of other voices, expertise, I think that's really helpful.
Well
So,
said.
so for me, it's breaking it down to the raw trauma, and that's why these conversations are so hard. And I feel like I'm just going to go and cry for the next hour after this because it is vulnerable, it is emotional, and it hurts deeply. But the reason it hurts, it's not just past trauma, is because it's still happening right now today to each of us.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so breaking that down and finding those core causes and having these discussions at different levels and policy levels, I think is really important.
Yes, and this has really been a great conversation, and I'm thankful that people were able to stay a little longer. I noticed that some people have left.
Well, I think we'll go to 4 o'clock in case anybody else wants to say anything.
It's
Even if,
it's almost 4 now, by 7 minutes.
that's right. We can even be together in silence. And Trina, I'm sorry about the losses you've experienced. And I know, and Michelle mentioned relatives also. So you have that in common. You said your father died a year ago too, I believe.
Yes, my father died a year ago on March 4th, and my mother died in October of last year as well. And it's definitely transformational when our parents leave, if you've lived with them most of your life.
Yes. I lost my father 7 months ago, and I went to Michelle's father's funeral in Alabama. A very large family.
Mm. Yeah, it's also, I lost my mom when I was 3 or 4. And to grow without a mom, very painful. And it just left me wide open for everything. And as a child, there were so many things that were so horrible, and a stepmother that was horrible. And so I grew up hating, not knowing love, but knowing hate, smelling hate before I could ever smell love. So it took a lot. And I'm lucky that I'm here today, because when I was 25, I wanted to just kill myself, and I tried. So I'm here, and I know God is good, but it is a painful existence for many of us. And my hope is that we can take some of that pain away, that we can help somewhere along the way and truly be sisters and really know brothers and really know love. So, you know, prayer is what gets me through the day.
But Starry, this is Shirley McLean.
Hi, Shirley.
I would just like to make a suggestion that we RDLN have a follow-up call with some of the people who are on the phone now and our regular network to discuss trauma and maybe grief.
And make what?
To discuss trauma and grief
Uh-huh.
at some future date.
Okay.
Yeah, and this may, I don't want to, I was contemplating, just because it's hard to do a presentation like this because it's so raw. But earlier today, I was contemplating those of us who hold trauma and grief and compassion, as opposed to people that use that as a weapon, and just that conversation. So if that makes any sense to people, I want to share that, but I kind of wondered if that was where some of the inequities come from, and how the people who are those carriers of community builders, as opposed to corporate constructs or constructs that actually maybe use these as tools, how can we strengthen these and use them for tools to continue to build our communities? That was a thought I had earlier today.
Sounds good.
This is Linda Bailey. If I can just get in here, I've lived a very privileged life. And so hearing your trauma is not something that I have not looked into and don't have a sense of. It is. How I spend my time now is looking at how some of those changes can be made that Trina was talking about. And politics is a very difficult thing, and it's very hard to transfer the problems that you have experienced through your life to political action. However, there are people that are running for office that are much more likely to be sympathetic to to your situation and to policies that could make a difference. And that's what I'm doing with my time and my resources, is I'm looking at those people that are leaders that can make a difference and doing what I can to support them and to reach out to people that would possibly vote for them. So I just want to say that there is something else that's going on that people can do that have not experienced the horrible situations that you all have. I do want to say again that I really appreciate hearing your stories. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Linda.
Thank you. Yes.
Well said.
Okay, so people been sharing in the chat information, and I have this Lucy Isaiah's contact information. We have about a minute left. Does anybody else want to share their contact information in the chat so somebody could grab it before we end the Zoom?
I hope you will, if you'd like to be involved. And in addition, we are recruiting rural leaders for our Rural Development Leadership Network program. And Shirley, Trina, and Meredith have been participating in our program. So I hope that you will think about people in your own communities who would be good participants also. Unfortunately, we didn't know Margarita before, but we're really glad to know her now.
Right.
Uh,
And the Rural Development Leadership Network website is in the chat if you want to copy it and
thank you, Meredith.
copy the link out from the chat as well.
Very good. I should have put it.
Okay, so I'll be
Thank
uploading
you,
this
everybody.
video to Starry so she can distribute it to the email, and I'm also going to put it on Rural Development Leadership Facebook page, which will be, is it shareable on Facebook? Where people can share it? Is it a public link?
I don't.
Sorry.
You
Okay.
told me, let's talk about that because I don't know how to do it.
Well, can Star review it first?
Of course. Well,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
thank you very much, everybody. It is 4 o'clock and it was a wonderful conversation, very meaningful. And I hope it leads to good things.
Bye, everybody.
Bye
God
bye.
bless you.
All right. Have a good
Hi,
evening.
Trina.
Been
Hi,
wonderful.
Meredith.
Bye,
Bye
Shirley.
bye.
Everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye all the guests. Thank you for staying.
Michelle.
Yes.
Michelle.
John.
Bye. Sherry.
Bye. Bye bye.
Lucy.
Bye, everyone.
Bye bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye
Bye.
everyone.